now you're looking at footage from an FPV drone flying the new Fat Shark Dominator HD video system. What you're seeing on screen is exactly what I'm seeing inside my FPV goggles. And that's a big deal because before DJI released their FPV system, this was what FPV video looked like. But as good as DJI is, they've got a lot bigger things on their mind than our little FPV community. And that has left a lot of people wishing a more FPV-centric company would release a great digital FPV system. And that's why the Fat Shark Dominator HD is so interesting, because it's very similar to the DJI FPV goggles in terms of features, range, and penetration. But it's made by Fat Shark, a company with deep roots in the FPV community. So could this be the digital FPV goggle that many people have been waiting for? I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. This is the part of the video where I disclose any potential conflicts of interest that might affect your interpretation of the things I'm going to tell you in this video. I have not received any money for making this video, and I have not received any other sort of forms of compensation like trips to the Bahamas or big steak dinners. But I have received this equipment from Rotor Riot. And this is a fairly expensive piece of equipment, and there is a fair amount of value in being the very first one to get this review out. In addition, I do appear in Rotor Riot episodes, and when I appear in Rotor Riot episodes, I am paid for that. So that's all the stuff that's in play, and you can decide whether that affects your interpretation of the things I say in this video, but I just needed to get it out there. Now, I think one of the best ways to discuss the specifications of this goggle is to power it up and show you the menus. And when I do that, you're going to see one of the best features this goggle has to offer that DJI, to this day, still doesn't do. The goggle can be powered from a standard lithium battery with an XT60 connector on it, like most of your flight packs, except the input voltage range is 2S to 5S LiPo. You are not supposed to run a 6S LiPo on it, and that's going to be a disappointment to a lot of people who have 6S flight packs and would just love to be able to use those. The goggle's power button is here on the underside. It is a simple latching switch, and what that means is that if you prefer the old way of powering your goggles, where as soon as you plug them in they turn on, you just press that switch in and leave it in and forget it exists. Now here is the first killer feature of these goggles. This is just a standard USB-C to HDMI cable. That's all it is, just a cable, 15 bucks on Amazon. But if I plug this HDMI cable into the display and I plug the USB into the goggles, so you got built-in USB-C to HDMI out. No $700 DJI smart controller needed. This is what I bought to do the same gosh dang thing with my DJI goggles. Now, one of the reasons why some people want HDMI out is because they're professionals and the actual feed from their goggles, from their quadcopter, is going to be sent out to the audience. In that case, you're going to be disappointed to learn that the system does not currently have the option to do a clean HDMI out. Notice that the goggle overlay is here, but they really need to add the option to have a clean HDMI out if you want to do this for broadcast, and currently the system does not have that option. I have passed that back as a feature request, and hopefully that'll get implemented at some point in the future. But let's continue our discussion of the goggles specifications by looking here in this settings menu, and we'll start with the transmit power. The transmit power can be as low as 25 milliwatts or as high as 700 milliwatts. Yes, out of the box. But there is in fact a 1200 milliwatt hack that you can do, and I will show you how to do it later in this video. So the maximum transmit power of these goggles can match the maximum transmit power of the DJI V2. So I don't know if it's my USB cable or the USB port in the goggles, but it keeps freaking popping out. It comes out super easily. Well, yeah, see, like that. If you were going to do this professionally, or if you really cared about the HDMI out, get some freaking tape or something and tape this freaking thing in, because it just pops out way too easy. The system has the option to do 1080p or 720p resolution, and that is over the air. That is not just for the HDMI output. There are some performance implications of doing that, and we will talk about that in the latency section of the video, but it's nice that that's an option. The frame rate can either be standard or high frame rate, except you'll notice right now as I'm trying to change it, nothing is happening. Standard frame rate is 60 FPS, high frame rate is 100 FPS, but high frame rate is only available if you are using 720p resolution. Down here in the lower left of the screen, we can see the voltage being supplied to the goggles, and here we can see the voltage being supplied to the video transmitter on the quad. And that's pretty cool because yes, you can have the full Betaflight OSD. You can see it right here. This OSD is being generated by my flight controller and is being superimposed on the video signal. And that's showing me my battery voltage of my quad, and that's fine. But some people are going to fly this system in like an airplane that doesn't have a flight controller. And with the DJI system, there is no way to monitor voltage because DJI can only get battery voltage from the flight controller. So if there is no flight controller, you're just screwed. With the Walksnail Fat Shark system, you can get the supply voltage to the video transmitter showed here in the screen, and there is a low voltage warning which can be turned on and off here if you want to do that. If you're running the video transmitter off a voltage regulator, then you should go ahead and turn that warning off because it doesn't really matter. But if you're running it straight off of VBAT, you may want that. I am really struggling with what to call these goggles. And you'd think it'd be simple, right? Because it's the Fat Shark Dominator HD. Except Fat Shark released a goggle called the Dominator HD. Years ago, it was an analog goggle. I don't know how it was HD. So to have another goggle out there called the Fat Shark Dominator HD is just confusing. But okay, it's Fat Shark's goggle. They can call it whatever they want. But then there's this other goggle out there from a company called Walksnail, which is called the Avatar, which is clearly the exact same goggle, except Fat Shark swears they're not making the Avatar goggle, and they're not the same goggle. And so, what do you call it? The Fat Shark Dominator, Walksnail, Avatar. I'm going to get it mixed up throughout this video. I'm not going to be consistent. But I do want you to know that officially, these are not the same goggle. And if you bought the Walksnail goggle, will you get support from Fat Shark if something goes wrong? I don't know, but it seems like the answer is no. Fat Shark disavows the existence of this Walksnail goggle, except they said they had a technology partner who made the internals of the goggle. And they said they designed the goggle. So clearly it's the same goggle. I have no idea, but I'm going to get the names mixed up. The screens in the goggles are 1080p resolution, and they are OLED screens. This is huge. OLED is brighter, it's more saturated, it's more colorful, it's just freaking awesome. Some people do worry about burn-in on OLED screens, and there's no way to know whether that's going to be an issue with this particular setup, but it is worth pointing out that FPV goggles have had OLED screens for a while now, and in general, whatever they're doing seems to be working. The 1080p resolution is widescreen, and that means that if you're one of those weirdos like me who prefers to fly 4:3 because you like the taller aspect ratio, you're just out of luck. There is an option in the camera settings to change the camera from 16:9 to 4:3, but as of today, it doesn't do anything. Now we're going to take a GoPro and put it in the eyepiece of the goggles so you can what is the point of this? Because a GoPro can't capture the full range of brightness and color that the human eye can. So you're not going to get the full experience of looking at these OLED screens. And I can tell you that the field of view is 46 degrees, which is pretty much the gold standard today for FPV goggles. A big immersive field of view that fills your vision without having the edges sort of go way outside your peripheral vision, or the edges getting all super blurry because the optics in the goggles can't handle it. 46 degrees is great. By the way, If you feel that 46 degrees is too big, some people like a smaller field of view, there is a menu option where you can shrink it down. So it's no big deal. What I think you can get from the GoPro is you can get a sense of how sensitive the goggle is to the placement of your eye. So you see if I move it to the right here, we get the screen being covered here and it's out of view. And it is not that sensitive. You can see I get a fair amount of movement here before it starts to get occluded, and that is consistent with my experience while wearing them. It's not one of those goggles where if they're not placed exactly right on your face, you're not getting the best possible view out of the screens. The other thing that GoPro can show us is that these goggles have built-in focus adjustment. So these are the IPD sliders, interpupillary distance, that adjusts to the width of your eyes. They have an adjustment range of 57 to 70 millimeters. And if you twist the knobs, you can adjust the focus from -6 to +2 diopters. So here it is basically focused, and if I turn that knob, you can see it gets out of focus one way and out of focus the other way. I will say that I think that the diopter range that they list in their specs is conservative. I have a prescription of -625 in one eye and -675 in the other eye, and I can perfectly focus the lenses and then not be at the end of the knobs turning. So I think they might go as much as maybe -7 or perhaps a little further, but I can guarantee you if you're in the 625 to 675 range, it works for me. And it's a good thing that they have internal focus adjustment because they do not have slots for corrective lenses like Fat Shark goggles have in the past. Next, let's discuss how the goggles fit on your face. Is there any light leak? Are there any pressure points? And so on. And this is going to be a little bit tricky because not everyone in the world has the exact same face. The faceplate on the goggles is removable, similar to other Fat Shark goggles before it, but it only comes in one shape. However, there are shims inside the faceplate. These shims down at the bottom are designed to try to solve the light leak problem, where there's a gap at the bottom and light leaks in, sort of spoils your immersion. And it does come with 2 more shims that you can insert, but they didn't do like they did when they released the HDZero and put shims here at the edge. Maybe that's what these shims are for. I don't know. The HDZero shims were much larger wedges here and really moved this in. And this doesn't look like that shallow of a faceplate to begin with, so I'm not sure how it's going to fit everyone's face. My best advice would be to get a very thick set of foam. Presumably there will be aftermarket foam for this, or possibly some of the existing foam for maybe an HDZero goggle would work. And if you get the thick enough foam, then usually it'll work one way or another, kind of no matter what your face shape is. The included strap is adjustable with Velcro. It does not have a battery holder, but presumably you could easily add aftermarket straps. And if we pop the faceplate off, that buckle is held in with these screws, so if you did need to take it off or replace it in some way, then it should be relatively easy to do. I'm also really happy to see that the buckle is not got a split like some of them do that lets the strap just slip out, and it is full metal, so that sucker ain't going nowhere. The next thing that's going to happen in this video is I'm going to take the Fat Shark goggles and the DJI goggles out and do a range and penetration test head-to-head to see if the scrappy little FPV upstart can finally knock down the giant multinational corporation. But before we do that, it's time for a little bit of a sponsor spot. Sponsors? I don't do sponsors on my videos. That's right. You're the sponsor of this video. Patreon is a website where you can subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned it. The amount is totally up to you. In the same way that you might hear a great piece of music on the subway and throw a couple bucks in the busker's hat, you can throw a couple bucks in my hat every month and help me keep making the kind of content that you are, I hope, enjoying, maybe getting value. You've watched a lot of it so far. If today is the day that I earned your support, there's a link down in the video description to patreon.com, and you can sign up. I'd love to have you as a supporter. If today isn't the day that I earned it, I'll keep making the content. You keep watching the content, and maybe that day will come. So here we find ourselves back at my favorite parking garage. Time to do a range test. And why am I doing a range test at a parking garage? because a proper range test would require me to fly kilometers and kilometers in the air. It's not something I could easily do legally, and it's not something I could easily do safely because there aren't a lot of unpopulated areas near where I live. But it turns out that when it comes to radio signals, range and penetration are actually the same thing. Range is just penetration through the air. So instead we come to a parking garage. And a parking garage is made up of concrete. Each of these floors is a thick slab of concrete. They're all about the same thickness. It's pretty repeatable, and bonus, we get a ton of multipath reflections, which is going to test that, the ability of the system to deal with that as well. So as I go down the floors, I'm getting more and more penetration. This is at least, I don't know how thick these floors are, but it's got to be like 12, 15 inches of concrete, and that's a fair amount of attenuation. Each time I go down a floor, I get just a little bit more attenuation, and the signal should get just a little bit weaker. Normally, I would also fly down to the end there and back, and because that's causing my control link to fail safe, I'm not going to do that until I get to the very bottom. So a little more attenuation each time I go down the floor. We're down to 7 megabits per second. There was a little micro fail safe. Isn't that fun? Now we're up to 25 though. It jumped back. Oh, now we're on the first floor, and there's another little fail safe. It's really struggling. So we are holding, come on baby, 2 megabits per second, 1.5 megabits per second, 1.4 megabits per second, 2.1, 2.5. Can I get her back? Nope. The video is holding at about 2 megabits per second, but we are fail-safed. I'm gonna go get my quad, and then we're gonna do the Fat Shark system, and we'll just repeat that same exact test. All right, here you go. Now it's time for the Fat Shark goggles. And by the way, in case it wasn't clear, at the end of the last test where I was saying 1 megabit per second, 2 megabit per second, I was trying to get, I know that like I'm right sort of underneath myself, and I'm not within the beam of the patch antenna. I was trying to sort of get the best signal as I could, though I don't think you saw that on camera. Because I know people are gonna say, hey, you got a patch antenna, it's pointing that way, but the quad is down underneath you, so yeah, obviously. I thought of that. But I won't rush this. We'll get this a nice, fair comparison. 21 megabits per second, 18, 25. This is a 1 watt Happy Model video This is a 1 watt Happy Model Express LRS module, but it is also an EP2 receiver with a ceramic antenna. So we're gonna see which wins. Oh, we're getting some stuttering here. Definite stuttering there. Control link is hanging in. Negative 96. Here we are in the exact same location as before. Exact same location. I'm going to disarm and set down. We've lost video. I'm going to move my head around. See if I can get it back. Completely lost video when I sit down there. Continuing our tour around the goggles, one of the things you're going to notice is not present is an AV input. You cannot use this with any analog system. You cannot have an external like ground station with an AV cable that goes into the goggles like you can with DJI. There also is not any option for an analog module, which some people would have hoped for, and which I can't help but mention the HDZero goggles are supposed to have. So if you have analog quads, like tiny whoops or just quads, you haven't moved over to a digital system, you are not going to be using them with this goggle in any way, shape, or form. Now, a set of FPV goggles is no good without a video transmitter. And at the time of this release, there is only one video transmitter and one camera in the world that works with these goggles. This is the Walksnail video transmitter and the camera that comes with it. The video transmitter is 33 millimeters wide by 33 millimeters wide. It's 33 millimeters square, and it is about 9.5 millimeters thick, if that matters to you. The camera is a standard 19 millimeter by 19 millimeter size, same as any other micro-sized camera, unlike the oddball 20 millimeter, 20.5 millimeter, whatever it was size of the original DJI camera that made it a little difficult to fit in some frames. And unlike the goggles, the video transmitter comes with its own antennas, and it does come with 2 of them because this video transmitter has diversity transmission, similar to the DJI Air unit perhaps, but different from the Caddx Vista, which only has 1 antenna. That should give it better performance in multipath environments. The antennas snap on with UFL connectors, as you would expect, and there's a metal retention bar to keep them from popping off while you fly, and that is amazing, but the screws that hold it on are really freaking tiny. Like literally my standard screwdriver wouldn't work and I had to get out my iFixit toolkit, and this is the smallest Phillips head screw in my iFixit toolkit. Look at these things. Sheesh. As far as weight goes, the video transmitter, camera, and antennas come in at 26 grams. Now, Walksnail have made a really weird choice when it comes to the spacing of the mounting holes. What do you think the spacing of these mounting holes is? It's probably pretty obvious that it's too big to be 20 millimeter spacing, like on a Caddx Vista. So you might guess that it's 30 millimeter spacing, like on the HDZero Freestyle VTX, but it's not. It's 25 millimeter spacing. And that's weird because 25 millimeter spacing is commonly used basically for toothpick style flight controllers, and that's it. Almost no frames that you're going to actually want to use this with. I guess you could put it on a toothpick and that would be great. None of the other frames you're going to want to use this with are going to have mounting holes drilled to actually mount it. Now, obviously, Rotor Riot has begun drilling all their frames to mount this thing because they're sister companies with Fat Shark. So we've got 20 millimeter holes on the inside and 25 millimeter holes on the outside. For everybody else, I mean, it's not the end of the world. You're just going to get some double-sided sticky tape and some zip ties, right? This wiring diagram, which is included with the video transmitter, shows how to wire it up to the flight controller. And we can see it's very similar to a DJI video transmitter if you're familiar with how to wire those up. But you've only got 4 wires, where the DJI video transmitter has 6. The 4 wires are power and ground, and it can take anywhere between 6 volts and 25 volts. So basically 2S to 6S LiPo voltage. And then we've got a RX and a TX connection to connect to a UART on the flight controller, and that's what allows the on-screen display to work. Binding the system is really simple. There is a bind button here on the goggles, and you push it to put them into bind mode. And there is a bind button here on the video transmitter, and you just press that, beep, 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 and then they bind together. So since it's got a bidirectional transmission system, how do you sort of tune in if you want to watch your friend fly? The answer is spectator mode. By going into spectator mode, you can tune into their transmissions. This is similar to DJI's audience mode. The difference is that you don't see any of the retransmitted data. So when you're in spectator mode, you get a much worse looking video than the actual pilot is seeing, but you can tune in. Except that at the time of release, spectator mode is not working. This is one of the things that they had to give up to get the goggles out in time for today, and they're going to fix it in a future firmware update, I guess. I mean, surely. In fact, it may be working by the time you're watching this. The other thing I got to tell you before we get into the flight footage is that there are 2 DVRs at play in this system. One of them is in the goggles. You put an SD card in the goggles here, and it records what you are seeing in the goggles. And that's good because it'll give you a sense of how good or bad the video is looking at various points. It lets you evaluate the effective range of the system and the image quality. But the video transmitter also has a built-in DVR. And that's good because it records, number one, it can record in higher resolution. So you can set the video transmitter to always record in 1080 resolution, even when your video link is at 720. And you'll get better latency and better image quality. You get lower resolution, but better image quality in some cases with 720 resolution. The other advantage of the video transmitter-based DVR is that it is always a perfect image. There's no degradation of the link. So you'll always get the best possible image out of there. But you may be noticing that there isn't any SD card slot on here. And the reason for that is that it has built-in memory. So the built-in memory is 8 gig in size. By my calculations, that holds about 20 minutes of 1080p video. And when you're done with that, you have to get the video off. Now, how do you do that? The video transmitter comes with this cable. It's USB, and it goes to this plug here on the side of the video transmitter, and you plug that in, and then you plug it into your computer, and it shows up as a removable drive, and then you offload the footage that way. Now, the good thing about that is that there's no SD card to lose. The bad thing about that is that it's not expandable in any way, and if it fills up while you're flying, then you have to offload it before you can download any more footage. And that offload happens at USB 2.0 speeds, so it takes like 10, 12 minutes. It takes a long time to sit there and download all 8 gig of data. Now, because this is a brand new video system, we're going to spend a little more time than usual going over its flight footage. And I want to start here where it's kind of at its very, very best, and then we're going to move to some places where it shows its limitations a little bit. And what you're looking at right now is the raw image from the camera being recorded in the DVR on the quad. This is the maximum possible quality you could possibly hope to get out of the system. There is no RF transmission here or anything like that. And now I'm going to slow it down a little bit so you can see a little bit more of the detail in every single frame. I hope you're watching this in 4K. Even though this image is only 1080p, YouTube's video compression means that you will see much closer to what the video actually contains if you're watching it at 4K resolution. So I highly suggest you select that resolution if at all possible. So that's the image that the onboard DVR is capable of recording, but that doesn't reflect what you see as a pilot. What are you seeing in the goggles, though? So now we can see that there is some blocking or smearing of some areas of the picture, and that's just how this type of digital system handles compressing the signal. I do want you to kind of soak it in a little bit. I'm going to have some specific comments and observations in just a little bit, but we're also going to compare this directly to DJI in the same environment, because DJI is sort of the gold standard here. One of the reasons the system doesn't look as good as it could, and if you're familiar with flying DJI, why it doesn't look as good as you may remember DJI looking, is that it's running at 25 megabits per second. DJI can run at 25 or 50 megabits per second mode, and when they released 50 megabit per second mode, it got way, way better. It makes sense. More bits equals more image quality. The Fat Shark system does have support for 50 megabit per second mode, but it is not activated at the time of this release because they're still, they're still working on it. So we're going to be seeing 25 megabit per second only in this video. Now, the footage that you've been looking at has been 720p, and that's the same resolution that the DJI system uses if that's something that matters to you. But the Fat Shark system can also do 1080p, and that's what we're going to look at now. In addition, you're going to see that I've added a subtitle track at the bottom of the screen to show things like the latency and the bitrate and other statistics of the system. And this is something that the goggles record to the SD card alongside the DVR so you can review it after the fact. It really stands out to me how it's handling the choice of where to put detail. Like right there, do you see how the ground gets really smeary there? I'm gonna fly it again. There's like no detail in the ground when we're moving quickly. It's super blocky and smeary. Whereas if I come up here and slow down, I can see all the details on this tree, right? It's fantastic. But when I get moving, the ground is very smeary, just super blocky. And that's got to be something they're doing to try and save bitrate, but it almost makes it feel like you're flying over like a bank of fog. When you're flying really close to the ground, it's actually fairly difficult to tell like how close you are to the ground, because the ground is just this big smear. And here, like right here. Even though we're moving slowly, there's huge blocks right here. Do you see what I'm talking about? Oh wow, that is really interesting. So if I were gonna dive in there, it's tricky. What is it doing? How is it deciding? Oh wow, oh, I must be super low, 9 megabits per second. Okay, so I am at the worst part in the property right now. This is the absolute worst. We're down at 9 megabits per second. That's really interesting how it's handling the breakup. That's fascinating. That's fascinating. I don't know how I feel about that. See, right here, right there. Was there a branch right in front of me? I don't know. Right here, there's no details there. Kinda. Like, I guess I can see my out. Now, let's take a look at how the DJI system performs under the same conditions. And what we're looking at now is 720p, DJI doesn't do 1080, and 700 milliwatts and 25 megabits per second. And in the past, when I've tested systems like this, I have tested them both at their maximum capability. So I should be testing the DJI at 1200 milliwatts and 50 megabits per second. And if it does better, hey, that just reflects what real people will be able to get out of it. And here's why I'm not doing that. Because the Fat Shark system has a 1200 milliwatt hack. It can do 1200 milliwatts. It just wasn't available at the time I was recording this. And we have every reason to believe that Walksnail will deliver on the 50 megabit per second mode that they're promising. So today we're going to run the DJI at 700 milliwatts and 25 megabits per second and see which of these systems. There's Apple. Oh, we're getting apples this year. That's so cool. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to run them in an apples to apples mode. Oh, did not expect that. We're going to run them in apples to apples comparison and see which technology seems superior rather than running them all out and showing which would win if development stopped today. Now, this location on my property is the place where signal is the worst because we're going through the barn and through my house, and we can see what kind of bit rate DJI is getting in this condition. And then we can compare this to the Walksnail Fat Shark system and see if it does any better. Getting about maybe 15, 20 megabits per second. Now let's do some flying around and see how the smeariness and so forth compares to what we were seeing with the Walksnail system, Fat Shark system. Maybe the antennas from Walksnail are just not very good. So let's try out these Lumineer Axi 2 antennas with Lumineer Axi Omnis on top. Are we doing any better? Behind the bar. Yes, we're doing much better. 21 megabits per second. I got the itch in my nose. 21, we were at like 10. So this is now on par with what the DJI was getting in terms of its bit rate. It's completely on par. DJI was also getting about 20. The latency is slightly lower here. We're at like 20 megabits per millisecond. Okay. It's still pretty freaking smeary, honestly. It is still pretty freaking smeary. It's just something about the way they're managing their bit rate, about how they're managing their image compression. I don't know what they're doing, but the ground is super, like I can't even see some of those there. Did you see I couldn't even see the bottom part of this pole? I literally couldn't see it. It was like it wasn't there. I'll see if I can do that pass again and see if it repeats. Look at the bottom of the, it's literally just not there. It's just a blurry block. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure how to interpret the results that we're seeing here, because I think that the DJI looks less smeary and less blocky under the same conditions as the Fat Shark, even though the Fat Shark seems to hold higher bit rate, at least the bit rate that it's reporting in its subtitles. And in other test conditions, like you're seeing here, this is the parking garage that I went to do the range test. Here, it looks fine. Like, I really don't see any of that smeariness or blockiness. And I don't know if that's just because when you're flying somewhere with lots of grass and trees, there's a lot more detail, and then as a result, the algorithm struggles to compress, whereas when you're somewhere with big flat surfaces, that blockiness just doesn't need to come out. Another thing that I thought maybe was that it's lower light. It's actually way closer to twilight here than it seems like it is. And maybe that extra motion blur that happens when you're in a low light situation is helping the algorithm out. I really don't know. But I don't want you to come out of this situation saying that the situation you see at my house is the sum total of the system's performance. It would be better at 1200 milliwatts, which we know is available as of the time of release, and it just seems like under some conditions it seems to do much worse, but in other conditions it does, well, you could see for yourself. This is not bad. Now, it's not easy to measure the latency of an FPV system accurately, at least not without some specialized equipment. But I've got a method that I think is good enough to at least find out if these numbers that are being reported by the goggle are in the ballpark of correct. And here's how it's going to work. We've got the goggles, we've got this light, which is going to blink on and off, and we're going to record with a 240 FPS camera, both the screen and the goggle. And what's going to happen is that light is going to begin to light up, and then if we frame forward a little bit, we're going to see that light begin to light up here inside the goggles. And by counting the number of frames, 240 frames per second means each frame is about 4 milliseconds, we can find the actual latency. And here are the results. Spreadsheets. Let's start with the result that is the most complementary to the Avatar goggles, and then we'll get to the result that is a little bit suspicious. When set to 720p high frame rate mode, showing between 21 and 22 milliseconds on the display, it was kind of going back and forth, I measured 25 milliseconds. Now, many people are going to notice that 25 is not 21. And that's kind of a big deal because the Avatar, the Fat Shark Avatar system has claimed to have slightly lower latency than DJI, which has a low latency of about 25 milliseconds in its low latency mode. But this doesn't seem to bear that out. And you might say, well, maybe you were slightly off. If I was just one frame off, then that number would go down by 4 milliseconds and it would be exactly correct. But I measured a bunch of times, and every single time it was 6 frames. Never 7, never 5. And it's not like, I mean, it just feels like 25 is the right number. That situation gets even worse for the goggle when we go over to standard frame rate 60 FPS. In this case, it was showing 27 milliseconds on the display, but I measured between 33 and 46 milliseconds. And this one was a little bit less consistent. And I don't think, like, there's a little bit of a judgment of which exact frame are we going to count that the light turned on and turned off. And sometimes it's really clear and sometimes it's a little less clear. But I don't think that these differences are explained away by that. I just don't think. I was there. I was looking at the frames and I just don't think so. Now, I knew that claiming that the displayed latency in the goggles was not correct and the actual latency was higher was going to make a whole lot of people freak out. So I also tested the DJI goggle. And this has been tested by many different people, including RC Shim and Mads Tech and others who aren't coming to my mind right now. And they have shown that the latency number shown in the DJI goggle is basically accurate. And I verified that result today with this exact same test rig. I've done it in the past and I did it again just to be sure nothing was weird today, and found that it was basically correct. I was supposed to bring home dinner and I thought, oh, the kids never had a deep dish pizza before. Maybe it's going to take like 35 minutes to cook. So let's see if we can kill some time by talking about other goggles that you might be looking for if you're thinking about getting the Avatar system. And we got to start with the DJI V2 goggles. Now, that is an end-of-life product. Now, you take that for what you want, because Caddx swears they're going to keep making air units and Vistas. Who knows about the goggles, though? DJI makes the goggles, and DJI is about to come out with the Goggle V3, and DJI is not known for continuing to make old products when they have a newer one out. So I think the V2 goggles are close to the end of their life, but if you get a set today, I mean, they'll probably keep working. But if you're starting from scratch, should you invest a lot of money in a system that might not have stuff available in the future? Or what if something's really good? What if the DJI V3 is really freaking good? Okay, DJI V3, it's coming. There's leaks and rumors. It'll probably be amazing, but we don't know, and we don't know when it's coming out. It could be a week, it could be 2 months. We just don't know. If that gives you a lot of hesitation, then you should just wait. You probably won't have to wait that long, but then at least you'll know. So let's assume at this point that you're looking to buy today. What about HDZero? HDZero is a really different game, and I do want to reiterate, you should go watch my review of the HDZero 1-watt Freestyle VTX, and you'll be like, oh my god, this is for me, or you'll be like, oh, that's not really for me. I think it's pretty polarizing. I think you'll know after you watch that video. I'll tell you one thing, though, that the Fat Shark Walksnail system could have that HDZero is known for, and that is a close relationship with the FPV community. Really, Carl from HDZero is setting an impossibly high bar there, though. He is so active and so communicative, and the upcoming HDZero goggles, which are supposed to come out before the end of the year, I know we said you weren't going to wait, you were going to buy today. They have so many features that the community asked for. He was at International Open. He is so communicative and connected to the community, and Fat Shark is definitely a part of the FPV community, but sometimes they're just like, why are you whining about a power button or whatever? But interestingly, I'm not convinced that Fat Shark is actually driving the development of this system. I do think they designed the goggles, but the firmware and the guts seem to come from Walksnail, and Walksnail is kind of an unknown quantity. But they have given us several things that we have wanted for a long time, like the DJI OSD and the USB video out. I haven't really told you which one to get yet, have I? I think my pizza's ready. And frankly, I wouldn't be doing my job if I did tell you that there was one best one for everybody, no questions asked. But I do hope that after digesting all of the information in this video, you have a better sense of whether the Fat Shark Dominator or Walksnail Avatar, whichever one you get, system is right for you. Fat Shark is coming out swinging here. There's no doubt. The price of this system is more. I was going to say it's on par with the DJI FPV system. $575, I believe, is the going price for DJI V2 goggles. The Avatar system, the Fat Shark system, comes in at $600, and it doesn't even come with antennas. The Fat Shark one doesn't. The Avatar one does, but the antennas are pretty crappy, as we learned, so that's not really worth very much. $600 without antennas, $640, $660, $80 with antennas, depending on which antenna. We're at the $700 price point just for the goggles. That's a lot of money. But they are delivering a lot. I don't feel like the performance of this system is on par with DJI just yet. And that's even if we were to assume that they were feature complete. Even at 25 megabits per second and matching power output, I still think DJI has a little bit better image quality in a lot of situations. But there's only room for Fat Shark to improve here, and the ability to do things like USB video out and full Betaflight OSD, the ability to get response from them in ways that we haven't gotten responses, quick responses, bug fixes, and features, at least during this product development phase, has been really, really encouraging. And the small size and lightweight of the goggles is something people have wanted for a long time. OLED screens, people wanted for a long time. This is going to be a very, very good system for a lot of people. If this is the system for you, there's links down in the video description where you can pick it up. And they are affiliate links, and especially on big expensive products like this, those affiliate links really add up. So if you are going to get this system, or if you're shopping for anything, please go down, click those affiliate links. I get a small percentage of any purchase you make after clicking them, and it really does add up. But you definitely should watch my HDZero 1-watt freestyle review first, and I'm going to put a card on screen where you can check that out. And it is also a little bit long and involved, but this is a big expensive decision and you want to get it right. There are people out there for whom HDZero is the perfect system, and that video goes into depth about why, but this video is already long enough. I will see you in the next one.